When you help someone in a meaningful way, something invisible is created between you. It is not written down, it is not spoken out loud, but it exists. It is a psychological contract. You gave effort, time, protection, guidance, or opportunity. On some level, you expect respect, loyalty, or at least acknowledgement. The other person may feel grateful in the moment, but they rarely agree to the contract you silently drafted in your mind. This is where the tension begins. One side believes a bond has been formed. The other side believes a problem was solved. You are operating from two different interpretations of the same event, and because it was never clarified, it becomes dangerous. The human brain constantly measures fairness. It calculates balance in relationships, often subconsciously. When someone receives significant help, their mind registers a deficit. They feel behind. Even if you never mention what you did, their mind keeps score, and the longer that invisible imbalance exists, the more uncomfortable it becomes. That discomfort does not always turn into gratitude. Sometimes it turns into pressure. Imagine being around someone who reminds you of a time when you were struggling, not because they bring it up, but because their very presence represents your previous weakness. The mind seeks relief from that feeling. One way to restore internal balance is to repay the favor, but repayment requires effort and humility. Another way, which is psychologically easier, is to reduce the perceived value of what was given. If they convince themselves your help was not that significant, the debt feels smaller. If they tell themselves they would have succeeded anyway, the imbalance disappears. And if they create distance from you, the emotional reminder fades. None of this requires malicious intent. It only requires a desire to protect pride. Most people protect pride faster than they protect loyalty. The problem is not that helping people is wrong. The problem is assuming that help automatically creates allegiance. When expectations are unspoken, they become traps. You believe a deeper connection now exists. They believe the chapter is closed. You move forward thinking there is shared history that guarantees future alignment. They move forward focused on independence. Over time, small signs of distance feel like betrayal, because they violate the contract you never verbally agreed upon. This is why clarity matters. If you help, do it because it aligns with your principles, not because you are purchasing future behavior. Remove the hidden agreement. Make peace with the possibility that once the problem is solved, the relationship may shift. When you understand that imbalance creates pressure and pressure seeks release, you stop personalizing what is often just human nature responding to discomfort. Gratitude feels powerful in the moment, but it is one of the most short-lived emotions in human behavior. When someone is struggling and you step in to help, their appreciation can seem deep and sincere. They may speak with emotion. They may promise they will never forget what you did. And in that moment, they truly mean it. But emotions are influenced by immediate circumstances. Once the crisis passes and stability returns, the emotional intensity fades. What remains is memory, and memory is flexible. The mind does not store events like a recording device. It reshapes them to support the current identity of the person. As they grow stronger or more successful, their need to view themselves as capable increases. The more capable they feel, the less central your help becomes in their internal narrative. Gratitude fades not because they are dishonest, but because their mind is reorganizing their story to emphasize their own strength. When appreciation weakens, the bond you assumed was reinforced by gratitude begins to loosen. Obligation, however, does not fade as quickly. Even when conscious gratitude decreases, the subconscious sense of owing something can linger. And obligation is heavy. It creates pressure in interactions. It can make simple conversations feel loaded. The person who received help may start to feel that every success is being silently observed, measured against what was given to them. Even if you never judge them, they may feel evaluated. Over time, that feeling turns into subtle resistance. They may avoid opportunities to acknowledge your role because doing so reinforces the sense of debt. They may pull away to escape the internal tension of feeling behind. In some cases, they reinterpret your assistance as something smaller or less generous than it was. This reinterpretation reduces obligation and restores emotional comfort. The shift is gradual, often invisible, but it changes the tone of the relationship. When gratitude fades and obligation remains, the dynamic becomes unstable. You may still remember the intensity of their appreciation, while they are focused on moving beyond the moment entirely. This mismatch creates misunderstanding. You expect continuity of respect based on past emotion. They expect freedom from past dependence. The more you subtly lean on the memory of what you did, the more they may lean away from it. The lesson is not to stop helping. It is to recognize that gratitude is temporary and cannot be used as the foundation for long-term loyalty. If you give without attaching your identity to their appreciation. When you remove the expectation that gratitude must endure, you remove the disappointment that follows when it naturally fades. When you elevate someone, you do more than improve their situation. You shift their position. You change how they see themselves and how others see them. But in that elevation, you also expose something fragile. The moment you help someone rise, you become part of their origin story. You were there at the point where they needed support. You saw the uncertainty, the confusion, the limitation. Even if you never speak about it again, they know you witnessed that version of them. As they grow stronger and more confident, they are building a new identity. That new identity is built on competence, independence, and control. Yet you represent a chapter where those qualities were incomplete. This creates internal tension. The more they value their new status, the more uncomfortable they may feel about the memory of dependence. It is not your words that create discomfort. It is your awareness. Your presence silently confirms that there was a time when they could not do it alone. For some individuals, that awareness becomes motivating. For others, it becomes threatening. Insecurity rarely announces itself openly. It operates beneath the surface. When someone feels insecure about how they achieved their position, they become sensitive to anything that highlights assistance. They may begin to overemphasize their own effort in conversations. They may correct small details about how events unfolded. They may subtly compete with you, trying to prove equal or greater capability. These behaviors are not random. They are attempts to stabilize identity. If they can redefine the narrative so that your help was minimal or incidental, they regain full ownership of their success, and full ownership feels safer. The problem is that this rewriting often requires emotional distance from you. The closer you remain, the more difficult it is for them to reshape the story. So they pull back. Sometimes that pullback feels cold. Sometimes it feels strategic. But at its core, it is about reducing insecurity. You must understand that elevation changes power dynamics. Before, they were in need. You were in control of resources or guidance. After they rise, they want equality or even dominance. If they still feel positioned beneath you, even symbolically, it can create resentment, not because you demand superiority, but because they perceive it. The key is recognizing that helping someone grow does not guarantee they will be comfortable remembering how they grew. When insecurity is stronger than gratitude, people protect their new identity at any cost. If you expect consistent loyalty without acknowledging the psychological shift that success creates, you will misinterpret defensive behavior as personal betrayal. Sometimes it is not hatred. It is simply the discomfort of standing next to someone who saw you before you believed in yourself. When you help someone during a difficult period, you become more than a supporter. You become a witness. You saw the hesitation before they acted. You heard the doubts they spoke out loud. You observed the mistakes, the uncertainty, the fear they tried to hide from others. Even if you never bring those moments up again, your memory of them exists, and that memory can feel uncomfortable for the person who experienced it. People work hard to present a stable, capable image to the world. They want to be seen at their best, not at their lowest. So when they stand in front of someone who has seen behind the curtain, it can feel exposing. It is not that you are judging them. It is that they imagine you could. The mind often projects criticism even when none is present. Your awareness becomes a silent mirror reflecting a version of them they would prefer to leave in the past. That mirror effect is powerful. Every time they interact with you, there is a subtle reminder of who they used to be. If they are proud of their growth, they may appreciate that reminder. But if they are still sensitive about their past weakness, the reminder creates tension. Instead of confronting that discomfort internally, many people shift it outward. They may interpret neutral comments as condescending. They may assume you still see them as incapable. They may look for signs of superiority in your tone even when none exist. This reaction is not about what you are doing now. It is about what you represent. The mind protects identity by attacking or avoiding anything that threatens it. If your presence triggers old insecurities, distance feels safer than reflection. Over time, that distance can evolve into resentment. Resentment does not always come from mistreatment. Sometimes it comes from comparison. If they believe you still hold the stronger position in the relationship, they may feel pressure to prove themselves. That pressure can turn into competitiveness. Competitiveness can turn into subtle hostility. What began as appreciation slowly shifts into defensiveness. The important realization is this: people do not just respond to your actions, they respond to what you symbolize in their personal narrative. When you help someone at their lowest point, you become part of a chapter they may not want remembered. If they lack the confidence to integrate that chapter into their identity, they may try to separate from anyone who reminds them of it. It may feel like betrayal to you. To them, it feels like protecting their current self from their former vulnerability. The moment you step in to help someone in a significant way, a power dynamic is created. It may be temporary and it may be unspoken, but it is real. In that moment, you hold resources, knowledge, stability, or influence that they do not. They are in a position of need, and you are in a position of strength. Even if your intention is pure, the structure of the interaction places you above and them below. Human beings are highly sensitive to hierarchy. We constantly assess where we stand in relation to others. When someone receives help, they are forced, even briefly, to accept a lower position. At first, relief overshadows everything else. They are grateful the problem is being solved. But once stability returns, awareness of that lower position can resurface. The mind seeks equilibrium. No one wants to feel permanently beneath someone else. So after the crisis passes, the natural instinct is to rebalance the hierarchy. Rebalancing can happen in healthy ways. They can grow, develop skills, and create value that restores equality. But it can also happen in defensive ways. If they feel the power difference still lingers, they may attempt to shift it psychologically. They might challenge your opinions more often. They might downplay your contributions in conversations with others. They might emphasize their independence in subtle but noticeable ways. These behaviors are often unconscious attempts to level the field. The internal message is simple: I am no longer in that position. The problem arises when you still perceive yourself as the stabilizing force in the relationship. Even if you do not say it directly, small cues in tone, advice, or reminders can signal that you still see them through the lens of the past. When they sense that, even inaccurately, the drive to rebalance intensifies. If the shift is not handled with awareness, tension builds quietly. You may interpret their new assertiveness as disrespect. They may interpret your steady guidance as control. Both sides feel justified. What was once cooperation becomes subtle competition. This is how assistance can slowly transform into conflict. The key insight is that power dynamics never stay frozen. They evolve. When you help someone rise, you must also allow the structure of the relationship to rise with them. If you hold on to the earlier hierarchy, even unintentionally, you reinforce the imbalance they are trying to escape. And when escape feels necessary, distance often follows. It may look like betrayal from your perspective. From theirs, it feels like reclaiming equal ground. When someone depends on you during a difficult period, the experience is not emotionally neutral for them. On the surface, they may feel relief and appreciation. But underneath that relief, there is often something quieter and heavier. Dependence can challenge a person's self-image. Most individuals want to believe they are capable of handling their own problems. When circumstances prove otherwise, even temporarily, It can create a subtle sense of inadequacy. They needed support. They required guidance. They could not solve it alone. Even if the situation was beyond their control, the mind can interpret dependence as weakness. That interpretation does not disappear simply because the problem was resolved. It lingers, and the person who provided the help becomes linked to that memory of vulnerability. Shame does not always appear as embarrassment or apology. Often it shows up as defensiveness. When someone feels ashamed of having needed assistance, they may become highly sensitive to any reminder of that period. A casual comment about growth can feel like a reference to their former struggle. A simple offer of advice can feel like an implication that they are still incapable. Even if your intention is supportive, their internal filter may distort it. Shame narrows perception. It looks for threats to identity and exaggerates them. Over time, that tension can transform into irritation. They may start to interpret your presence as pressure, not because you are demanding anything, but because you symbolize a time when they felt exposed and uncertain. To reduce that uncomfortable feeling, the mind looks for relief. One way relief appears is through emotional distancing or subtle hostility. If they convince themselves that you are controlling, condescending, or unnecessary, they no longer have to confront the deeper discomfort of having depended on you. Blame becomes easier than reflection. This is how shame quietly turns into resentment, and resentment seeks separation. From your perspective, you offered support and stability. From theirs, they experienced a period that threatened their pride. Unless they process that experience in a healthy way, they may associate you with the emotional weight they felt at their lowest point. Understanding this dynamic does not excuse unfair behavior, but it explains it. When you recognize that dependency can generate shame and that shame can evolve into hostility, you stop being surprised by reactions that once felt personal. Sometimes what appears to be betrayal is simply a person trying to escape the memory of needing help. When you help someone, your focus is often on solving the immediate problem. You step in, you provide resources, guidance, or protection, and you feel a sense of responsibility for their progress. In your mind, the act of helping strengthens the connection. It creates what feels like a deeper bond. You assume that shared struggle builds long-term alignment, but the person receiving help may be focused on something entirely different. Their primary goal is not strengthening the relationship. Their primary goal is regaining independence. While you are thinking about loyalty and continuity, they are thinking about freedom and self-sufficiency. This difference in focus is subtle but powerful. You see the assistance as the beginning of a stronger partnership. They see it as a temporary bridge back to autonomy. As they regain their footing, their priorities shift. The closer they move toward independence, the less they want to feel tethered to the moment of need. If they sense that you still view them through the lens of guidance or oversight, they may interpret it as limitation. Even supportive check-ins can feel like supervision if they are determined to prove they no longer require support. From your perspective, you are maintaining care. From theirs, they may feel observed. The more determined they are to establish self-reliance, the more they may pull away from anyone associated with their dependence. This is not necessarily rejection of you as a person. It is a psychological movement toward autonomy. The problem arises when your expectation of continued closeness collides with their desire for space. If this misalignment goes unspoken, frustration builds quietly. You may feel unappreciated or replaced. They may feel constrained or underestimated. Neither side fully articulates their internal narrative. Over time, small acts of independence from them can feel like acts of disloyalty to you. Meanwhile, your attempts to stay connected can feel like subtle control to them. The tension is not rooted in malice. It is rooted in incompatible expectations. You believed help would secure loyalty. They believed help was a stepping stone towards standing alone. When you understand that many people value autonomy more than attachment, especially after a period of need, their distancing behavior becomes easier to interpret. It is not always betrayal. Sometimes it is simply the final stage of the recovery you helped them achieve. Unspoken expectations are quiet, but they are powerful. When you help someone, you may not say, "You owe me." You may not demand recognition or loyalty, but internally, you often assume that the relationship has changed in a permanent way. You believe your effort has secured a certain level of respect, access, or priority in their life. The expectation may feel reasonable to you because it is rooted in the value of what you gave. The problem is that expectations held silently are rarely shared equally. The other person may see your help as generous but temporary. They may not attach the same long-term meaning to it. So while you are moving forward with a new internal agreement, they are operating without one. This difference stays hidden until behavior exposes it. And when their actions fail to meet the standards you never verbalized, disappointment feels like betrayal. The human mind fills in gaps automatically. If someone does not respond the way we anticipated, we assign intention. We assume they are ungrateful, disloyal, or selfish. But often, they are simply unaware of the script you wrote in your head. You expected them to consult you before making certain decisions. You expected them to defend you in conversations. You expected them to remain closely aligned with you because of what you did. If those expectations were never discussed, they cannot consciously agree to them. When they act independently, they may believe they are behaving normally. Meanwhile, you experience their independence as a violation. This is how unspoken contracts collapse, not through aggression, but through misunderstanding. Clarity is uncomfortable, but it prevents silent resentment. If you desire a certain type of relationship after offering help, it must be expressed calmly and directly. Otherwise, you must release the expectation entirely. Holding someone accountable to rules they never accepted creates unnecessary conflict. It also shifts your help from generosity to transaction. The most stable position is to give without attaching invisible strings. If you choose to attach conditions, make them clear. When expectations remain hidden, they grow in the dark. And when they are eventually broken, the emotional reaction is stronger than the situation itself requires. What feels like betrayal is often the collapse of an agreement that only existed in one mind. Not everyone you help will betray you, but patterns begin to appear when you help without boundaries. When you repeatedly step in to solve problems that others could attempt to solve themselves, you train them to associate you with rescue. At first, this feels positive. You are reliable. You are capable. You are the one who can fix what is broken. But over time, this dynamic can erode respect. When assistance becomes predictable and constant, it stops being seen as sacrifice and starts being seen as availability. And availability, when unlimited, is rarely valued at a high level. The human mind tends to appreciate what requires effort to access. If your support is always accessible, it may quietly lose perceived value. What once inspired gratitude becomes expected. When expectation replaces appreciation, the emotional tone of the relationship changes. Without boundaries, roles become rigid. You become the problem solver. They become the one with problems. Even if both of you dislike that structure, it persists because it is familiar. The danger appears when they begin to resent the very role they occupy. Being the one who always needs help can feel limiting. It can feel like a fixed identity. Instead of confronting their own inaction or hesitation, they may unconsciously associate that uncomfortable identity with you. After all, you are always there to step in. Your presence highlights their dependence. If they want to escape that identity, distancing from you becomes part of the process. From your perspective, you were consistent and supportive. From theirs, you became a symbol of a version of themselves they no longer want to be. Strong boundaries change this dynamic completely. Boundaries do not mean refusing to help. They mean allowing space for growth and responsibility. They mean offering guidance without taking control. When people participate in solving their own challenges, they retain dignity. Dignity protects respect. Respect stabilizes relationships. If you remove every obstacle for someone, you may remove the opportunity for them to build confidence. And when confidence is weak, resentment is close behind. The key is balance. Help in a way that strengthens capability, not dependency. When your support reinforces their autonomy rather than replacing it, the relationship stands on equal ground. And equal ground is far less likely to produce the kind of tension that later feels like betrayal.